Welcome everyone to another episode of the NBA Fantasy Lounge. And in today's episode, we're going to be chatting about player statistic websites, NBA resources, and the best way for players to do their own research for the upcoming NBA fantasy season. Now, before we get into it, one thing I'd like to say is that I can tell a lot of players still like to get a lot of their fantasy tips from either websites that have pre-done rankings like Basketball Monster, or even from YouTubers as well, which is all well and good. But in my opinion, it's really enjoyable and a lot more satisfying when you can develop your own strategies as well as your own understanding of players and from your own research to then be able to execute on that during the fantasy season, and then obviously ensure that those conclusions come true, so you can actually win with those conclusions and know that you've actually been the one to research and understand those insights to lead to those victories as well. So, all right, guys, so we're going to dive right into it, and we're going to start off with the NBC Sports Edge website. Now, the NBC Sports Edge website is good for a couple of reasons, and we're going to start off with the Players News tab here, which is the NBA Player News feed. Before I run through this, I will say as well that NBC Sports Edge website is awesome for all different sports. It's not just NBA. It actually does fantasy baseball, basketball, football, soccer as well, and a number of different other ones as well. So I will just leave that side note there to start off with in case you play multiple sports. So the NBA Player News feed is really awesome for people who don't have that much time. The reason being is that basically it's a feed that updates daily, and it has heaps of different updates about not just the top players, but even the average players as well. And it gives you an indication of how they went that game, whether or not they had any standout games, whether or not there was any injuries, whether or not the coach disliked them or liked them, etc. Gives you a lot of different insights from tweets and other things as well, like quotes, that you're able to get in one compiled area as well. And that allows you to keep up with the NBA and other players outside just the top ones or the ones on your team without having to go into too much depth. So it's really good in my opinion in terms of getting all the information in the contents area for people who are limited with time. And also, even if you have a lot of time, you can start here and then work your way into researching different areas. So really good all round, the NBA Players News feed. Now let's dive into the NBA depth chart. You can see here, you're probably wondering, who cares? It's the NBA depth chart. We can find that anywhere. Yes, that is true. And I'm going to point out that NBC Sports Edge isn't like the greatest for NBA depth chart. However, I will say the NBA depth chart seems to be an underrated tool to get information from. Let me give you a couple of reasons. Now, the one thing is that it's good to get an indication of player depth at particular positions prior to the season starting. So prior to the season starting is really important, because if you can land a really good underrated pick, for example, Jordan Poole last year or Vanderbilt or something like that, you can basically set yourself up to have a really good season. Or even Evan Mobley, I know, was a really good pick last year, because you already have a star player at a really late round. So that's why it's really important, number one. So let's take, for example, you got Charlotte Hornets here. Now at the PG position, you have LaMelo Ball and only LaMelo Ball. What does that tell you? That there's no other PGs here, which means that he's probably going to be in line for a lot of minutes and usage. Now, you're probably looking at me going, well, this LaMelo Ball, who, we already knew that. We didn't need to know that. That is true for LaMelo Ball. This is just one example. But there are other examples where the players have very little depth at position, and they're going to be in line for a lot of minutes. Now, a good example of this is San Antonio. Now, we look at the PG position. All they have is Trey Jones and Blake Wesley, who I don't even know who he is. So he's obviously not really that famous. So if we look at the PG position here, we could say confidently that Trey Jones is probably going to get at least a decent run to a really good run of minutes. Now, that's not guaranteed, but at least it's a starting point for you to start looking into Trey Jones and going, is he going to get run or not? And look at his past stats, etc. So that's a really good reason. The other really good reasons for the depth chart is due to forecasting or foreshadowing changes in the future. So I'll give you an example. If we go back up to the Charlotte Hornets, we can see here that at the small forward position, they only have Gordon Hayward and Kelly Oubre. Now, if Kelly Oubre was to get injured, who's going to be in line for the small forward minutes? Obviously, Gordon Hayward. I mean, maybe they might try a lineup with Cody Martin at small forward, or I don't even think Book Knight, maybe PJ Washington. I don't know. But reality is, it gives you a higher chance that those players are probably going to be in line for more minutes. Now, that's good for a number of reasons. One, you want to trade. Two, you know that the other player at that position is injury prone. Or three, you know that player is going to get traded. So it gives you a good ability to forecast particular changes in the future, knowing that that player is set up for potentially more minutes due to the fact that there's no depth in the future. So A number of great reasons why the NBA depth chart is a really good starting point, again, for understanding which players could be good in the future, as well as even just the drafting perspective of it. In my opinion, it's always worked for me. And I wanted to share that with you guys because I think that a lot of people can get some value out of the depth chart. And again, you don't have to go to the NBC Sports Edge one, go anywhere. There's tons of depth charts. I just like this one because I'm already on NBC Sports Edge for other reasons. So let's now check out the third part of this website, which I really like, which is the game logs. So we have Tyler Hero's game log here right now, right? So again, game log, big deal. You're probably like wondering what's the big deal? Everyone can look this up everywhere. The reason that NBC Sports Edge does separate itself from other game logs, in my opinion, is the fact that it lists games that the players do not play. Now, this is really good for a number of reasons. Why? Because if that player is injury prone, for example, and he gets, let's say he's going to be out for 2, 3, 4 weeks, we'll say. You don't know who's going to be going to take up all these minutes, right? A good way of trying to understand that is to look at what happened in previous games when he did not play for whatever reasons, whether it's injury or he just didn't get played for whatever reason. So this is really good because it shows you, in comparison to other websites that don't show you this, it shows you which games he didn't play with a fat 0 next to his name. And you can go into those particular box scores for those games and be like, okay, great, he wasn't there. Oh, Gabe Vincent got a ton of minutes and did well. Or it was Marcus Strus. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But the point is that it gives you some ability to give insight into what happens when that player is injured. And then it gives you ability to make a better pick when that player is injured as well. So again, a lot of people, in my opinion, may just look at the regular game logs. I think this is really good because it gives you that. And then you can take this, look at the box scores and make your own conclusions as well. So the game log on NBC Sports Edge, really, really good, really underrated again, in my opinion, and gives you that ability to pick up players that others may not be looking at, which is what's going to give you the edge at the end of the day of winning that NBA Fantasy League. Okay, so we now have the Basketball Reference website up, and we're basically in Onyeka Okongwu's 2021-22 splits. Now, a lot of websites have splits again, and you're thinking, great, what's the big deal? But the reason I like this splits is because you see this minute splits here. I think this is awesome. I haven't found another website that shows this, but basically it shows you the different splits at different minutes for that player as well. So at 10 to 19, you can see that Onyeka averaged 7 points, 5 rebounds. At 20 to 29, it was 10 points, 8 rebounds nearly. And then at 30 to 39, it was 13 points and 8 plus rebounds. So you can see the different splits there. And it's really awesome because I know for a fact that I remember last year, he was in a reserve role, right? So he played 42 games in a reserve role. Now, on average, if you just look at that stat, great. He's had, 8 points, 6 rebounds, and you think not that great. However, during the end of that season, he was in the reserve role still, but he was getting that 20 plus minute per game. Whereas at the start of the reserve role, he was getting that 10 plus. So that's a big jump. That's a big difference between those two statistics as a reserve. So it's sometimes a bit misleading just to look at the reserve stat and think, okay, great, he's only 8 points, 5 rebounds or whatever. It's good to go into the minutes and see what's going to happen, because if you know that he's going to get more minutes in the future, even as a reserve still, then obviously it's important to understand what that minute change will look like as well. So the minute splits is awesome because it shows you the different stats at those minutes. Now, one thing I want to point out that's a little bit annoying with Basketball Reference is that with the splits, they show totals for some things and averages for some things. So with minutes, points, rebounds, and assists, you can see it's got his averages per minute split. However, with things like assists, steals, blocks, turnovers, it's all the totals that he got at that split. So it kind of sucks because you have to figure the split out yourself, the average out yourself. But it's not that difficult because it has the games played. So for example, at the 20 to 29 split, he played 16 games. He had 18 blocks in the 16 games. So you could say he's going to average like 1.1 block a game in that 20 to 29, even though it's not listed here. Simple maths. So that's something to call out. The other thing that is call out, which is a good call out, is the usage. It shows you all the usages at each minute split, which is really important as well, because sometimes you can see that he's not getting the type of usage at 10 to 19, but his role is changing at 20 to 29. Now, this is not a great example of that because as you can see, his usage is the same, but for a point guard, it's probably going to be more relevant because he's going to get more usage at a higher minute per ratio, whereas centers, a lot of centers don't get high usage because they're just not that great once you're out of the top sort of like 5 rounds of NBA fantasy. So Basketball Reference, the splits is awesome. The minute split is really good, and it also has other splits as well that is pretty common amongst most websites, but the minute split is what sets it apart in my opinion as well, which allows you to deep dive even further into those players and again find those gems that other people can't find. Now, we will just quickly touch on the ESPN splits. If you do want to check out some of the splits and get averages without doing the calculation yourself for things that are in both websites, so for example, month splits are in both websites, you can just come here to this website and you can get them. So if you're too lazy to do calculations like I am for most things, just come straight here or any other split website. Yahoo, I think Yahoo has one as well, and you can find those splits as well. The last thing I want to touch on before we end today is the basketball reference per 36 minute stat. Now, this is really, really cool as well. This per 36 minutes. So, okay, we'll start off with per 36. What is per 36 minutes? Per 36 minutes is what an NBA player would score or would average if he played the full 36 minutes of the game. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen, but basically it gives you an indication of which players would be able to improve their fantasy value and their statistics if they were to get an increase in minutes as well. So if we have this list here, it's currently sorted by points, but if we go to rebounds, for example, we have Andre Drummond leading at number 1 with 17 rebounds a game per 36 minutes. So this would indicate that once he gets off a reserve role, he's probably going to do pretty well. Again, probably is a key word because nothing is guaranteed, but he has a high chance of doing well. So you want these types of players. Another good example is maybe like Precious Achiuwa or even Isaiah Hartenstein. He got traded this year to the Knicks. And I know he's playing behind Mitch Robinson, who is injury prone as. So you can guarantee that if Mitch Robinson gets injured, which is probably not an if, Isaiah Hartenstein is probably going to be in the mix for more minutes. And you can see that he's a pretty good rebounder once he gets more minutes. So you're looking at maybe like even at 20 minutes, he's maybe going to get 7 rebounds a game. So that's why this is really important. You can sort by any stat, which is awesome as well, which is just really good. So if you're looking for more assists, you can sort by assists and pick up the guy that will get a good assist. Trey Jones, for example, is a good. Going back to what I was saying earlier, Trey Jones get a bump in minutes. He gets pretty good amount of assists once he gets the minutes. And steals, there's rebounds, and points is really good as well. Points and rebounds are probably the best where I get from this because you get a lot of guys that are underrated rebounders that can still get like 5, 6, 7 rebounds a game, which help honestly. And same with points. You may not find a lot of 30-point guys, but you can find a lot of guys who will still give you anywhere between 15 and 20 points a game that are sort of gems off the waiver wire as well. So I really rate the per 36 minutes on Basketball Reference. I think it's really usable, and you can actually scroll back to different seasons as well. So I'm in the previous season, but if you want to go 2 seasons back just to see which players have been consistent per 36 and whether or not, because sometimes you can get a per 36, it's just an anomaly to one season. So you can even go back and check multiple seasons. So all around an amazing place to deep dive and really get that research you want to get into and find out a way to see whether you can find any gems or not. So let me know what you think works for you as well. If you guys can think of anything as well in terms of websites that are really helpful, drop a comment and let me know. I would love to know what you guys think. I'd love to know what else helps other people, and I would be happy to do a video as well on other things that are really underrated as well. But in my opinion, doing the research yourself during the season is so much more satisfying, because when you know that it was on you and on an insight or a sort of whim that you had in your head as well, which is just makes everything more enjoyable when you can win knowing it was all something that you sort of created yourself. So all right guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe as well, because I have a couple more videos in this series on the best NBA resources, including some overviews on some great social media platforms to get info from, as well as forums as well, which can really help. So stay in touch. I will be back with a couple more videos. Otherwise, I'm out, and thanks again for watching on the NBA Fantasy Lounge.